All right, we are live on the interwebs. Welcome everybody to this live session today. It's going to be phenomenal. You're going to love it. Lots to learn, a lot of things that we're going to talk about. Mostly though is how are you going to grow your net profits and your MRR without adding a boatload of new customers. And there's a whole lot of reasons you want to do that. Number one, as you guys know, adding new customers is probably the single most expensive and difficult thing that you do in your business. And if it's not number one, it's up there in the top three, I would say, right? So adding new customers, it's expensive, it's difficult. The more customers you need to hit a number obviously is not good. That means more onboarding, more customer service, more engineers, more everything. So if you can get the same or more profitability with fewer customers, that is always going to be my preference. It should be your preference as well. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about how do you get more with less, okay? And on the call here with me is Mr. Paul Sissel, who I am always ever impressed with. He is founder of a company called Growth Caddy. It's a business of one today. Lucky him, like he's where we all want to be someday, right? Where he made his money and this is what he does for fun. Or when he wants to buy a new plane or something like that. So anyway, but Paul has been involved in the MSP community for how many years have you? Because you had your own MSP. How long, Paul?
I've been in IT for 43 years. I'd say in the
Wow.
solution provider business, probably 30 years.
Wow. Okay. Great. Phenomenal. So, I'll have him talk a little bit about his background. And also got Rob Patterson with me. Rob is a long-term member, Producers Club member, was the vice president of sales and marketing for a big MSP in New York area, 6 million in revenue, and is also very, very well-versed in what we're going to be talking about here today. So just as a quick reminder, we are recording this. I will post it up for you guys to watch the recording. If you have any questions, put it in the Q&A. All right, just put it down there in the Q&A, not in the chat. So the webinar chat is like for things to say, Rob, your hair looks great today. You could say things like that, or, Paul, like, I love your shirt. Things like, hey, we're having a great day, whatever. Definitely put that in the webinar chat. But if you have questions, put that in the Q&A because that allows me to monitor that. And so, before we kick off and really get rolling here, I'd love it just to make sure you're all out there. I want to see how many people are going to be commenting. I'm curious to know what is your biggest challenge when you get a customer, onboarding them, monetizing them, like the quarterly business reviews. I'm curious, just so we can, in the webinar chat, not the Q&A, just put in there, kind of what your biggest challenge is. What do you struggle with? Do you struggle with doing QBRs? Do you struggle getting the owner on it? Do you struggle trying to get them to take your advice? Do you struggle with raising your prices? I mean, I just came back from DattoCon and I was very fortunate to be able to lead a panel of some very high caliber MSPs. I mean, these guys, the smallest up there is 50 million, the biggest up there over $1 billion in revenue. The companies that were there, just really, really, phenomenal. And they were saying, Paul, you'd be interested here, and Rob, to hear this, is they were saying, hey, you got to raise your prices, like again, like right now, because that money goes right to your bottom line. And if you're not making money, what are you doing? And that sort of thing. So yeah, I would love to kind of hear from you guys in the chat. What is your biggest challenge with either account management, onboarding, monetizing clients, getting them to take your advice? That'll kind of guide us a little bit here today. So Paul, we're still like letting people are still piling in here. Can you briefly give everybody, some people might not have heard of your awesomeness. So could you please tell everybody why you're so amazing and why we need to listen to everything you say?
And when I'm done telling you, could you tell my wife all this too?
Yes, 100%. It's recorded. You could play it for.
Well, I started in IT 43 years ago after flunking out of dental school and being a surf bum for 3 years. But
I did not know that.
Okay. I worked for a large company, Hewlett Packard, learned a lot there from a marketing perspective, got my MBA, was fortunate enough to go to work for a small venture capital group who, what do they do with young MBAs who think that they can do something? They put them into their worst opportunity. So I went into a company that was losing money. The chief technical officer was dying of AIDS and couldn't make payroll in the first 2 weeks. So I figured that out. And then, kind of grew from there. I eventually started what ended up being a small solution provider, a long distance resale company that I merged with a larger company, and we went public on the American Stock Exchange when that existed. And that was just one heck of a ride. We put up 24 sales offices, had 2 call centers, strung nationwide fiber with 5 different internet pops, and did a lot, made a lot of mistakes, learned a lot along the way. Bought 23 companies, so I kind of learned the M&A game. And we ended up, for a lot of different reasons, our main investor sold all of their outstanding shares to Quest. So I left Quest Communication and had a 2-year non-compete. Started working, was an angel investor in a few small companies, and trying to buy a company that wouldn't sell to me for all stock. I ended up buying them I put together a small venture capital group and some angels. I was a 51% partner. Bought that company. They were a long distance and solution provider company. MJ Shore was their outsourced MSP. So MJ did a lot of work for me. And we really grew that company really quickly. Pooled with a company out of Rochester, New York, and went public as a Choice One Communications. In 1999, I think our top market cap was about $1 billion, and then the market tanked from there. Retired from that, and then ended up a year and a half later starting a pure play solution provider in the Boston area with a gentleman who was my VP of sales at the time. We grew that to 17.5 million, 2.6 million in EBITDA, and sold that to a large $200 million plus MSP. And I did M&A for them for 2 years. Along the way, I was fortunate enough to be in peer groups. That's where I learned a ton. Was a Robin Robbins customer. Got all the toolkit, and was in a couple other peer groups. I was fortunate enough that Paul Dipple from Service Leadership about 3.5 years ago asked me to come on board as a senior analyst. So I do work for them from analyzing the trove of data that they collect to co-facilitating their peer groups. And a company that you may have heard of, Technology Marketing Toolkit. I was fortunate enough to become an expert in residence with them. So, and then with that, I'm on right now I'm on 9 different boards of advisors. And what that involves is I'm involved in everything. In their weekly management meetings, I'm in 8 or 9 hour-and-a-half meetings every week, setting goals, trying to run the best in class metrics.
For MSPs.
For strictly MSPs. I'm a one-trick pony.
Okay. All right. So he knows a little bit, guys. Like there's, over 50, he's helped over 50 MSPs have successful exits. So he understands this game really, really well. And that's why I wanted to have him on this webinar today, is because he sees every single day what the most profitable best-in-class MSPs do. And like on the panel, I was at DattoCon yesterday, and the panel up there said, the reality is most MSPs don't make any money. Like they just don't, they do all this work and they don't make any money. And so that's what we're going to talk about more in this webinar. Now, before we move on though, Rob, can you just give everybody, it's hard to follow that. All right. You know what I mean? So. you know.
Yeah, I mean, I got stuck, at the image of Paul as a surf bum for a couple of years. Like pretty much what he said after that was like super impressive, but that was it's an image I'm trying to, come to terms with right now. So I come here, I mean, yeah, I can't resume, maybe because I've only been in the channel 20 plus years. I don't have as much I can bring to that. But I can say this, in my job of the last dozen years, I've really been in the trenches as that person on the front line, trying to understand how to run account management, how to run sales, how to do all the things that a lot of you are struggling with or want to get better at. And I did take that company from under 2 million to over 5 million. And I mean, I was fighting that literally every day, trying to learn the process, join peer groups, apply something. So what I'm trying to bring to all of this is Paul has definitely got the treasure trove of knowledge. It's exciting, especially to geek out on the numbers and everything. And I'm always going to try to kind of bring that, like, okay, so how do we actually make this actionable, and you go back and do it in your business, and help coach you on that, and so that you can, have those results too. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. So Rob is one of our like head client coaches now, running Producers Club, which is our highest level membership. And he's great. I mean, and so these two gentlemen are phenomenal resources for everybody. So let me kind of set the table for all of you watching, to understand how this webinar came about, what we're doing, and so forth, because this all is extremely important. And it kind of dovetails. I think, Paul, if I'm not mistaken, didn't Service Leadership just come out with their annual report where it basically showed that 28%, if I think I'm remembering this right, of MSPs are not profitable? And by not profitable, meaning they're not making money. Like, I'm not saying like, okay, well, we're making a little bit, like, is that right, Paul? Am I getting that right?
You get the number right.
Okay.
28%.
So think about that. And guys, and then you look at the median, which is about 10%, best in class, they're making 18, north of 20% net profit, in addition to paying themselves a fair market salary, and they're growing. And so, one of the things that, way back in Q1 of this year, we run themes in our accountability groups, in our mastermind, because just so everybody knows, not everybody on here is a client of ours. I mean, some of you are those, hangers on, fans out there in the interweb, but you're not a customer yet, so you wouldn't know this. But we run like quarterly themes for our coaching groups, and in Q1 of this year, we said the focus is going to be on how to do QBRs and account management. And what we discovered was it's only roughly about 20% of MSPs are consistently doing quarterly business reviews with their existing customers. And of those that are doing it, they're only doing them with about 16% of their customers. And, I was actually really shocked by that. And so Paul was not, I think, as you can see, he was not shocked by that. And that's where we kind of said, hey, we really need to dig into this. So Paul, I guess the first thing to answer is, why is doing this account management piece so important for an MSP?
Oh, geez.
I mean, it's everything, really. When you get
I mean, it really does. If you can't manage your customers to your profitability, then why would you get other customers? Right? It's not, if you're not helping your customers, if you're not fulfilling what their needs are, if you're not fulfilling their growth, it doesn't make sense to put on any more customers, because all you're going to do is mess them up. So you really have to, through this process, we've done this Be Prepared series, Robin.
Mm-hmm.
And what has it been now? Like, we just did our 14th one. So I've worked with you on putting this program together for the Producers Club that monthly goes through in order those things that you that you need to do to run a great MSP that can survive and thrive without you. If you decide to sell it, if something happens to you, whatever. And we've gone through the absolute key tenets, what we'll call the pillars for MSPs. Mm-hmm. And onboarding is the third or fourth main pillar that you have to really focus on.
Hmm. And Rob, you want to add to that anything?
No, I mean, at least in the business I was with, we focused really, really hard on trying to get that EBITDA to 15 to 18%, because at some point a few years ago, had that very thought of, if we're going to bring on a lot more customers and we're not really profitable and working account management, getting the most out of it, we're just all really working really hard to not really make money. So, and we had, many versions of account management. So I mean, I won't go into all that, but we've probably, when I left on version 4 or 5, trying to really dial that in. So it's not an easy area, but it is crucial.
It's funny you say, again, I'm referencing the panel yesterday. Jesus Pena is like a senior VP at UDT. They're a $450 million MSP. And he said multiple times, look, if you're running an MSP, you got to have a plan, meaning how big are you going to get it? What is the profitability going to be? What is the model? Like, he kept saying, you have to have a plan and you got to stick to your plan. You can't be like, one day I'm going to do this, and then you change your mind. And, you got to really have a plan. But I think the plan that you mapped out there, Rob, I like the work really hard, make no money plan, right? That's then you start up an MSP and, you can work your ass off, take a bunch of risk, be stressed out, anxious all the time, running around, getting clients yelling at you, and make no money. So that, that is, but that's the existence for a lot of MSPs out there, I think. So,
Right.
yeah.
Robbie, think about the first, I don't know, 4 different webinars we did. It was all around a value creation strategy. If you're going to work, what value are you trying to create for yourself, for your family, for your people, and for your customers? I mean, that's the first thing that you should work on. And then from there, you figure out who your customers are going to be and how you're going to support them.
Exactly right. So I want to fulfill in the webinar's title because, I pulled these numbers from you, Paul. You said you had exact case studies. So as much as you want to share, the webinar was how to grow profits from 147% to 582% while doubling MRR, client happiness. And you said you had some MSPs that you work with that were smaller ones. They weren't the huge, $100 million MSPs, that you were able to grow profitability. I think you said over a 2-year period by just doing this account management piece right. So start unpacking that.
I mean, so these are I don't know, friends of mine now. They're, part of the 9 or 10 companies that I work with on a weekly basis. And so since I retired and started doing this, I've worked with 17 companies on a weekly basis, of which 7 have sold for greater than 300% of what their original value is when we started working together. There are companies that I've worked with. So these 4 companies, and I forget whether I have 3 or 4 that are going to be, in the deck. I've worked with them every week, and we started with the foundation, the main pillars. It's, what is your value creation strategy? What is your number? What is your target customer profile? How narrow can you get your stack down? Once we do that, do we have great training for our employees? Do we have great CSAT? From there, all that stuff was, I'm not going to say relatively easy, but that's like a 6-month to a year project. And then from there, we really look at the existing customer base and understand why there's all these issues in it. A lot of people bring up they won't go to QBRs, they don't do this, they don't do that. Well, it's because we never really did a great onboarding, and you really have to have a great onboarding plan. And what does that mean? You have to understand what risk you are assuming as their service provider. What risk sits in that base. Is there, we used to do cable certs on every single cable run. Was there a cut 100 feet into the cable? We wanted to know what the risks were. When we all really started this quote unquote MSP thing, I think that term in my mind came out around 2003, 2004, we were just bringing customers on board, and then the CFO would call us in 6 months later and say, hey, why am I paying you $6,000 a month? I never see you here anymore. And then you'd kind of go blah, 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 blah. So we had to draw baselines of what their pain was and what their pain looked like. Did they have clear TCP IP traffic and any issues with UDP? Could they do X, Y, and Z? So we knew the extent of the risk in that network, and then we could put together a plan to help mitigate that. And then as we did that, and the best in class that have done that, we're working with our customers. We become their partner in growth. So they need IT to grow. They don't want to hire IT professionals, and they're looking at us to do that. I just went way off track, didn't I?
I was thinking because you kind of went down a couple roads there. So,
Yeah.
But again, going back to, I think maybe you could just talk to us about one or two of those case studies where you work with them. Like, where were they when you got there? What changes did you make, and what were the results in profitability?
Well, yeah, I'm
and
thinking
of course, enterprise value. Yeah.
I'm thinking of one right now. Two of them were mainly what I would call break fix. They didn't call themselves break fix. They called themselves block time. But one of them had upwards of 70% of their revenue on block time. So we focused on understanding the customers, understanding what our underlying costs were, understanding what pricing we should be charging, what margins we wanted to make. And then we dove into the customer base. There were 110 customers, of which I think they probably only had 15 or 20 that were true MRR customers. And we did what I'll call an ABCD analysis. A being those customers that are 70% or greater gross margin, they buy everything that we tell them to buy. And the D customers are under 30%. They'll leave you at the sound of you raising prices. Everybody on your service desk doesn't like to pick up the phone when they call in. So we looked at that base, came up with the new pricing, came up with the new product, and went at that customer base to raise prices, to make clients that didn't understand what we brought to them. We made them available to the industry for other MSPs to pick up. And we focused on those that were growing. That's what it is. I mean, it's a pretty standard process. And that's what we're going to go through in this workshop, which is, all right, let's take a look at our base. I think everybody on here who's been in business for quite a while, you have a legacy base that you go, yeah, we probably didn't do a great onboarding, and they don't want, new products. I'm reading a lot of stuff. They won't take QBRs. They won't do this. They won't do that. We're going to talk about that, how to segregate your base, and then how to go after the base to get the best billing from that base.
Okay. So going back to that client, 110 customers, 70% are break fix roughly. When you went back and raised prices, how much did you raise prices? Roughly. Do you remember?
I'd have to pull up the spreadsheets. I didn't talk to any customers as they were raising their prices. I worked with the leadership team to do it. So they did all the heavy lifting. I just worked with them. I'd say that in average, pricing probably went up 15% across the board, at least. But there were some companies that were charging $95 an hour to break fix customers, and we raised it to $175 an hour. There's no need to charge less than you're charging for your MRR customers for projects. Okay.
So typically so I know one of the things, I teach it too, go back, unless you're getting, I just want to make sure everyone understands some of these terms. So we're talking about service gross margin. Service gross margin is the amount of money left over you take your top line, for $100, let's say your tools cost, I don't know, 20 bucks. I don't know if that's even makes sense. And $30 is your employees. That gives you 50% gross margin that goes into the business. And did I describe that right, Paul?
Yeah, but the numbers weren't exactly that. So service gross margin is the gross margin you get from services. And so what's that? It's your service revenue.
Mhm.
So your service revenue is that revenue that you have to apply people to, right? It's your non-product revenue. It's not your Office 365. It's not your antivirus. It's
Not hardware, right? Yeah.
not hardware, not recurring hardware. It is your services revenue.
Okay.
If you take a look at your services cost, and those services cost are 80% fully loaded payroll, W-2 payroll, and it's 20% tools.
Okay.
So best in class service gross margin is 50%. So if you have $100, your services gross margin are going to be $50 of that. 80% of that's 80% of your COGS are really now it's 40% are going to be your payroll. The remainder are your tool cost.
Okay. All right. So when you're okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's funny because we're before we do this workshop, the webinar we're doing at the end of this month, it's called this, calculating your service salary cap. What I think people fail, the majority of service providers out there either turn a blind eye to it or fail to focus on the fact that there is a salary cap in this industry, and that salary cap is your services revenue. If you have services revenue of $100 and you want to make best in class gross margins, which are $50, you can only spend 40% of your services revenue or less on your payroll. And I consistently see people spending in the 60 and 70% of their services revenue.
Right.
And they wonder why they're not making money.
Well, yeah, I mean, overhead walks on two legs for sure, So again, going back to these, some people on here might be like this, they're break fix. So again, what you did when you went back to this customer, you said, hey, we gotta create managed service packages that will provide us good gross margin, good recurring revenue at priced properly. We're going to go back to these 110 customers, 70 of which are break fix. We're going to raise prices, maybe at 30% or more. And so they did that, over a 2-year period did it take them?
It was about 2.5 years.
I'm sorry?
That was about 2.5 years with that.
Okay. And so did they basically like onboard them like a new customer? Is that kind of how the approach you took?
Yeah, we did what we called a mini onboarding.
Okay, what is that? What is that, and what does it look like?
Well, instead of, if the firm had, let's say, if their onboarding process was 60 hours for a brand new client, they would probably spend about half of that, about 30 hours onboarding this customer.
Okay, but what are they doing in there? Are they doing like a rapid fire tools deep dive? Are they what does that look like?
Yeah, all the above. They're doing rapid fire tools. They're doing I've got a list of like 10 or 12 that they're doing. Galactic Scan in there. They're developing a really good baseline for the customer because they never had a baseline of the customer before. They're getting the documentation right for the service desk team. They're delivering now the plan. You and I go back and forth on what the name of it is. It could be a roadmap, could be a remediation report that then has a budget. They're delivering a budget to a customer who never had a budget before. And I think it's important to do that, new onboarding with existing customers to get them to act like you would expect a new customer to act. You have to change the way that they're perceiving you. So you put together a budget, and that budget, number one, tells them what they need to spend to mitigate risk. If they don't have MFA in there, you need to do these projects. Secondly, it tells them what they need to spend to get on your technology stack. And then third is, the projects that you're going to work with them on so that they can grow their business.
Okay. All right. So a couple things. So again, onboarding, and Rob, I'd love to hear your opinions on like what your thoughts are. So it seems like from what I've heard working with you, that a lot of MSPs just kind of slap a PSA tool, RMM tool on there, whatever, and they just go, but they're not really doing that deep analysis of a client's environment, network, software, hardware, documentation, and analyzing where are their risks in cyber compliance. The tech stack, obviously that's to your benefit. You might just call that your stabilization. You're looking at, okay, we're looking at risk. We're looking at where they can align better on our tech stack. So then you can support them better, easier, which will, I think, lower costs, because if you're using the tools you're used to, that's better. And then where are they growing? Are they going to add locations? Are they going to be adding employees? How many are they going to be adding every month, every quarter? So you can be prepared for that, right? So I think that's the onboarding you're talking about. Rob, do you want to add anything onto that?
I think I echo that. I think that sort of default mode is you do the smallest amount of assessment up front just to know the glaring risk and like how many computers do you have? Well, how many computers do you have, and do you have like no antivirus, or some level towards that end? And I think what we found over time, and it's funny. There's a trait in service leadership, called, like, I think it's called selling the assessment, and we spent a lot of time debating back and forth whether you try to sell that up front or not sell it up front. And at the end of the day, at whichever point you're going to do it, certainly early in the relationship is best. You have to get that deeper level roadmap together, because that's where you also become you differentiate, because like in our sales process, we were pushing that we're a strategic partner. Is another part of it. We're not here to just fix things when when a toilet plugs up, oh, here we are with the plunger. Like, we're your strategic partner, and we can't really back that claim up if we're not doing that deeper assessment to say these are all the areas that we see need improvement, and this is how we're going to get aligned on that. And we're not going to just drop this bomb on you and say, hey, you need $80,000 to replace all this stuff. It's on the roadmap. We're going to do that in Q2, Q3, Q4. And I think we were talking before about how we come in, and maybe that default mode is we have a PSA, we have RMM, we come in, we tell people, well, we're reliable, we're honest, and we're going to get the job done. And that's kind of what we would say are permissions to play. Like, on the way home, I drove past this hotel the other night, and on a big sign, it was like a budget hotel. On a big sign, it said, "We have clean rooms." I was like, well, that's awesome. Like, none of your competitors have clean rooms. So I think that's why you want to, like, I'm definitely sleeping there. So I think that this next tier of this analysis gets you also elevated into that strategic advisor role, which is super important for everything else you want to set up from there.
Okay. So again, let me just kind of recap, because I feel like we're getting a little all over the place. So again, we're talking about account management. We're talking about doing good quarterly business reviews where you have for that client a roadmap. And the roadmap is essentially, here's where you are today, and here's where you need to be. And the roadmap has projects that are mapped out quarterly, monthly, and with a budget. Here's what it's going to cost, and here's how we're going to implement this. So for example, like when the current MSP that works with us with Vector Choice, right? So they come on board, and we were looking for a new MSP. We weren't happy with who we had, and they did a deep dive technical analysis. That's what you're talking about, this onboarding. So they looked at all the hardware, software, equipment aging. They looked at security. They found a lot of holes in the security, by the way. So, things that I didn't know were going on. So they found all these risks on security. They said, hey, there's some aging equipment. And so when they came back and said, okay, here's what we're going to charge you for managing your network, but here's the roadmap that you like, here's some things we need to fix immediately, and these have got to be done in the next 30 days. There's security risks. There are things you want to immediately take care of. And that's what so the MRR is just to manage and be help desk and stuff like that. But here's what we got to do as a project in order to get you stable and to get you secure. We were already pretty stable, just to get us secure. But then what they did is they said, hey, in Q2, Q3, Q4, you've got this equipment here that's older. We're going to have to replace some desktops, laptops. We weren't really using SharePoint properly or OneDrive. So they're like, hey, this is going to make everything more efficient. So they put that on the roadmap. They said, hey, we could get rid of Slack and Zoom for a lot of people if we implement Teams. So that went on because we couldn't do all of that stuff in the first I mean, it would be tough on us as a company, and it would be tough on them. So they mapped it all out and said, okay, here's the phases over the next, I think it was like a 6-month plan or whatever. And then they're meeting with us quarterly to say, okay, here's where we are. I mean, in the beginning, it was more frequent. That's essentially what you're talking about, guys, right? I just want to make sure everyone understands that. What most MSPs don't do is they don't do that deep analysis. They don't do a roadmap, and they definitely don't do a budget. So they just is that correct, Paul? Rob, do you guys have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and we're just talking about how a good onboarding and a good budget benefits account management, but it benefits the entire organization. A great onboarding is you understand the account and you're stabilizing it for your service team. The project team should do your onboarding, and the service manager gets to review that onboarding and all the documentation to make sure that they're feel comfortable in supporting that customer. Finance looks at everything. So the onboarding really has many tentacles in helping a healthy MSP. But from the account manager's perspective, the account manager is the overall coordinator for the business health and growth of that customer. They're not another conduit for the help desk. They don't do, looking at some of the comments here, they absolutely do not do escalations. They don't do any tickets. They don't do anything like that. They're there to help this company get on your technology stack, reduce risk, and grow.
Okay. Okay, great. So I'm like looking at comments. I'm like, I just make sure I get everything here. So again, I think the question, so the component parts for those of you watching is asking yourself, when you get a new managed client, one, if I think it's just even like, and goes to what you were saying, Rob, in the sales process, I think it starts all the way up there and actually using this as a way of differentiating your company in the sense that you could sell it that, look, most MSPs, they're going to come out here, they're going to slap a couple tools on your network. They're going to start doing, you can call them for help desk, and they're going to start managing part of your technology. But that's where it's going to end. There's two other component parts to this. One is strategic account management in the sense of professionally coming in and I don't know if you want to call it a VCIO, or I like fractional better. I think some people use that virtual CIO, but I'm going to be a fractional chief technology officer, chief information officer. I'm going to sit on the C-suite with you, and I'm going to be strategically looking at your entire environment and your business, risk, compliance, stability, disaster recovery. And I'm going to put together a plan based on your situation, your needs, your budgets, as to where we're going to take you. And then I'm also going to give you a budget so you can budget for IT properly instead of these whack-a-mole things that come up every once in a while. And, you know, you're going to have an MSP, if you're talking about the former one, they're just going to slap some tools on there. And when something melts down or breaks, then they're going to come to you and they're going to say, well, you got to pay us a whole bunch of money to fix this. And you weren't expecting it. And it could have been planned. It could have been done properly, but it's because they don't have the account management side either, which is someone who's a dedicated account manager, and they don't have that high level strategy. And that's what differentiates us. So when you are selling to a new customer, you use that as differentiation, but it also sets the expectation that, hey, we're going to do a deeper analysis. Most people won't do that. Yes, we charge for it, but that way we get a really good blueprint of what's going on and how to support you. And then we're going to meet with you quarterly, and we're going to roll out a plan for your business. And that's so, because, you know, some of the things and questions I'm seeing is like, well, clients won't meet with me with the QBR. And that's because you never set it up right to begin with. That's what we're talking about. It's about selling it, setting it up right from the beginning. And then those QBRs become easy, and you don't need a slick salesperson. You just need somebody who has that plan, looks at the environment, and they're all, I want to make sure I'm summarizing this correctly.
I think you've done great.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the same things, you know, QBRs. If you can't get customers to do QBRs with you, it's one of a couple of things. One is you're not providing, or if you can't get the C-level in there, you're not providing the information. You're boring the heck out of them. So as a C-level yourself, if you sat into your own QBRs, would you fall asleep or not? You've got to add value to that C-level. Secondly, you may have the wrong accounts. If they just want you to do CPR on 7-year-old machines, they're not a growth account. You know, they're probably not the right account for you. You know, every account that you have, you should be able to do a QBR on.
All right. And Rob, you were going to say?
Yeah, no, down the same exact road. And that last point you made is actually one of the ones I don't think people think so much about, that you're setting up that expectation that there's going to be quarterly meetings. And in fact, if you're not having them, you're not delivering on the promise you made on the way in. It's the opposite of trying to force somebody to, it's like, hey, this is part of what you're paying for. Remember, this is part of why you chose us. So that's a nuance, but I think it's a big deal.
Yeah, you know, I see best in class accounts do QBRs on greater than 90% of their customers, and they have 250% greater adjusted EBITDA than those that do less than 50%. I mean, the numbers are all there.
Yeah, it's obvious.
Yeah.
Right. So when they're doing, so I just want to also say, like, what, because one of the questions came in from Kelly, how much of the plan to mitigate risk do you share pre-sale? So it seems to me like, well, pre-sale, you might be doing a quick assessment where you're looking at, like, maybe you're using a galactic scan and it's just giving you like a quick, here's the big holes. It's giving you how many end users, it's telling you how many machines and stuff. But then what we're talking about here, this project, which is this deeper analysis, is something you charge for, and you let the client know, like, okay, roughly we're going to charge you X for managing, you got, you know, a number of employees, endpoints, whatever it is, but we're going to have to do this, you know. And a lot of people, MSPs, I think they call it onboarding. They say we're going to, you know, but I don't know if I'd call it onboarding. That doesn't sound very sexy. You know, you want to say, you know, we're going to be doing this deeper IT analysis, and we're going to look at 3 areas. And this is the 3 areas, Paul, that you just talked about. You know, you're saying this to the customers, 3 areas we look at. Number 1 is risk. You know, where are you at risk for a breach, compliance violation, data loss and downtime? You know, where is something that's going to come bite you in the ass? That's the most, we got to look at that first. The second thing, I wouldn't say, you know, aligning with your technology stack when talking to a customer. You would call it maybe, the second thing we're going to look at is stabilization. We want to make sure you have the right technology in there, so you're stable, you're up, you're secure, and there's going to be a moving process from probably where you are to where you need to be. And the third thing we're going to look at is growth, because you're going to grow your company. You want to lower costs, you want to increase productivity of your employees, and we're going to look at the growth. So, you know, when you're doing that deep analysis and you're charging for that, then you're telling the customer, once we do that, then I can come back with a budget and I can come back with a roadmap and we can discuss the strategy of what we're going to do in the tech space. So I think, I don't know if you guys want to add on how much of the plan to mitigate risk do you share pre-sale? I think that's the answer to that, unless you guys disagree or want to add on that.
I'll add something about two things. One is about risk. It's not only the client's, the inherent risk to the client based upon their network, but it's also their risk to you. That's what you want to find out as well. As you look at their network, you're going to be able to find out whether this client's operationally mature enough to work with you, or are they just going to be a draw on your resources and end up clicking on the dancing pigs and getting, a big cyber event. As the top performers, as they're doing onboardings, they have a very, very good sense of what it's going to cost to do all the projects. And, most best in class people will tell me over the first year, they're going to spend about 150% of their MRR on projects. Maybe that's over 18 months, but each company develops their own sense of that, Robin.
Mm-hmm.
So they may say that up front. It's all part of the sales positioning, I guess, which each individual company has.
Mm-hmm.
You know that they're going to have projects that are be equal to or greater their MRR during their first year to 18 months with you.
Mm-hmm. Right. And, again, I hear this all the time. Well, customers won't meet with me with the QBRs. They won't take my advice. They won't spend the money. I mean, so what would you guys say? I think, look, I think part of it, that's true, but I think that's a failure of a salesperson helping them understand why they need it, why it's important, where the value is. And yeah, there are some customers, no matter how much you explain it, they're just tightwads, like you said. They want you to do CPR on 7-year-old machines and stuff. So, you got to walk away from those guys, because, here's the other thing I'll also tell you. People don't think about this. When you pick the right customers, your business really rises and falls on getting high value, right fit customers. Because if you will take anybody who can fog a mirror and wave a dollar, you cannot do your best work, right? And then when you don't do your best work, the customer who's cheap and they never come back to you and say, well, I know I suck as a customer, I'm not taking your advice and I keep being cheap, so I know this is my fault, right? They don't do that. They say, you suck, you failed, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. And they have you running because they're angry at you and they're yelling at you. So then you're doing more work for free and it's frustrating everybody. So I think, if you think about this process that we're talking about, which is the strategic account management, number one, the right customers want that. Like when I was looking for an MSP, that's what I wanted. I'm like, I don't want these surprise IT bills. I want someone who's going to come in here and manage it and manage, like, help me with risk, help me with compliance. Like, I'm not looking for cheap. I'm looking for good. I'm looking for someone I can trust. And, and I think, that's almost a litmus test for you guys. If someone doesn't want that, then walk away and let the 28% who don't make money, they'll go take them. Right. I mean, am I explaining this right?
You hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
Run from those people.
Right. Okay. So strategic account management. Now, real quick, what I want to do, we've been having a little trouble with the website. So I'm not sure if this is Mike. I think Mike Stadol's in the background. Mike, if you could, because we've kind of hinted at this. So in December, we're going to be doing a masterclass with Paul, with Rob, and we are going to be doing this on account management and digging into how do you do that onboarding, like in the details, like how specifically what tools are you using? What questions are you asking? How do you then, because Paul, I know one of the things you did when you would do these for clients, you would come back with a physical report and you would give it to the client, but not just say, hey, go read this. You would sit down with the client, you had a couple of summary page, and you're reselling, okay, here's the plan, here's the budget, here's how we're going to get there. So I think, okay, oh, Jeff is on, good. I thought Jeff would be taking a nap. He was at DadOCon with me. We got in late last night, but okay, good to see he's working. Okay. So, you know, there's the link there. We're doing this account management class and talking about how do you do that onboarding, and really that how those expectations are set and how that plan is put together. That then QBRs should be easy because you've already done the plan, the budget, you've already set the expectation, you've already sold the value, and now you're not trying to scramble. And I think where most people are having trouble with the QBRs is they don't have the budget and the plan. They haven't done the deep analysis of their client. And now they're trying to do these QBRs, and they're just sort of surprising their clients. The clients go, well, why do I need this? You've been doing my IT for 5 years and you've never met with me before. Why do we got to meet now? Right. You know?
It's one of the biggest, I wish we had enough time to talk about this now, but we can talk about it in December. One of the biggest mistakes that I see with people when they bring on account managers, they go, here's a list of accounts, go out and develop a budget for them. The account manager has no clue what, number one, being new, knowing what the technology stack and package of the company is. Number two, knowing the company, the customer, and knowing their risk or how they were onboarded or any of that. You know, if you don't have account managers at the moment, you need to be prepared to support them by going back to each of those accounts and doing some type of onboarding and developing that list and that budget before you hand it over to the account manager. You cannot rely on them to do it.
Yeah, I would like to add to that, and I don't know exactly how Paul would view this, but one of the things we did when we started to really try to straighten out account management is borrowing from Paul Dippel's story in a different way. We kind of called it like principal-led account management, and we had this gap in between to all the people that we didn't sell the concept to well on the way in, and now we were trying to get them invested in here. We kind of waved the flag on the fact that they were getting a high-level person to sort of kick off this story, and that eventually we'd be transitioning to, I mean, and part of that came from the fact that we didn't really have real account managers in place. So we sort of spun it a little that as the senior member was doing this for now to help in the development of it, and very similar to developing, you know, good salespeople that they're gonna shadow an owner or a principal for a while, and then that's at least the one way we got through some of that transition. I don't know if that's recommended or not, but because I think it's also very similar too, and I think what Paul's going to teach about from what I've seen is really kind of how you put together that QBR and mirroring into sales again. It's like you can't just hire a good salesman and not have any sales process and say, oh, he's a good salesman, he'll figure it out. Go sell stuff. It's
I thought that was the part you were putting. I thought you were putting the QBR part together.
Oh yeah, I am. So that's how I know it's going to be so good.
It'll be great. So yeah, you two knuckleheads are not in sales, that's for sure. You're doing your technical stuff. So all right, so I'll just show you the class. So we are going to be doing this in December. It is going to be in the beautiful Ritz-Carlton, Coconut Grove down in Florida. I said, hey, if we're gonna, so we actually were planning on doing this earlier this year when we discovered that most MSPs are not doing proper account management. They're not doing the QBRs because they don't know how to do them. They don't know how to do account management, period, full stop. And so we decided to have this down at the Ritz-Carlton, Coconut Grove. So it's beautiful. I said, we're going to do it. We'll do it in December. It's got to be someplace nice and warm. And it's going to be myself and Paul and Rob are going to be the main ones there. But we are also going to be bringing in some MSPs that are doing this really, really well to talk to you about how they're onboarding, what tools are they using, how they are overcoming problems. Like if a CEO won't, refuses to do the QBR, or if they won't agree to the budget, or they're not following your advice and they're putting you at risk, and how do you navigate all that? And I think that's what you've got to have a process for that. So how to create an IT budget obviously is going to be one thing. How do you do the analysis, that deep analysis? How do you go back to the customer after you've done it to map out the roadmap? How do you map out the budget? How do you have that conversation? And then how do you do the QBRs so that you're taking that plan that you put together and you're rolling it out, right? Paul's also going to talk about how to hire an account manager, whether it's a technical account manager, or some people call it I think they call it a TAM, Paul, like a TAM, technical account manager is what they call it. Some people just call it account. Some people call it a client success manager, whatever it is. You know, who is that person? Who's the best person? Should they be technical? Should they be more sales or the customer service? Who are those people? When do you hire them? How do you compensate them? How do you manage them? He's going to be covering that. How best in class MSPs conduct their QBRs. How do you conduct those meetings? We're going to give you a step-by-step process for that. And of course, a lot more. So it's being sponsored by Cloud Radial and Kaseya right now. We might be adding on a couple others, but it's going to be a really, really good class. It's going to be small too. So our goal was we had to have 80 registered, just so, you know, for us, it's like, okay, if we 80 tickets, and it's not a lot of money, it's $600 a seat. It's really, really cheap. So, you know, 80, you know, we needed 80 people. I think we're at 98 right now. And I think the room we can expand it to 120. And then after that's done, it's done. We are going to record it. So when you go down there, as part of the value you're going to get the recording. I would suggest if you have a business partner or Paul, would you recommend they bring a service manager maybe if, you know, with this onboarding piece, or if they have an account manager, they should bring them, I would think.
Right. Who's ever in charge of the onboarding should certainly be there. And, you know, a large part of this is also going to be looking at your customer base as it stands, and who and in what order to approach your customer base to start doing this with. So you're going to have to have access to, you know, the financials in so much as, you know, what does each customer bill for the trailing 12 months.
And we'll figure, so yeah, before the class, we're going to have some pre-webinars to kind of prepare you to come in. Like, what do you want to put together so that while you're in class, because the goal is when you leave, we want to not only have you know how to do this, but what we really want you to do is have a plan. So when you go back, you can go back and start with your existing customers first to get this process in place. In doing so, you're going to make more money. You're going to get a feel for the process. You're going to be able to practice it a couple times on good existing customers. And that's going to increase your revenue, but it's going to increase your confidence. And then once you've got that going with your existing customers, as you talk to new customers, you can say, you know, here's our process that very few people in the MSP world do. And that's true, because I just told you at the beginning of this webinar that it's roughly only about 20% of MSPs are even trying to do any kind of strategic account management at all. And then of those who are doing it, they're only doing it with about 16% of their customers. So this is a blue ocean opportunity for you to say, let me show you my process for how we do this strategic account management. This is what's going to make us different than everybody else you're going to talk to, who's just going to slap a couple tools on your environment. And, you know, it's just going to be like I like that term, that it's going to be CPR, whatever, you know, crops up, but it's not going to be strategic. You're going to get surprise bills. You're going to get disappointed because when you need a project done, they don't have it planned. So they might not have the staff. And so you might be struggling with getting things done because they don't know how to plan these things out and staff accordingly, right? So there's all this ways. And so, yeah, when you leave that class, you're going to have that plan to go back to existing customers, but then also to new ones. And like I said, I think we have, I think the room's 120 we can hold, and we were at 98 this morning. So I think we got about 22 more seats. Most people are bringing a person. So that's probably about 11 more companies that we have room for. All right. So, all right. So let me go back. Paul or Rob, you want to add anything to that?
We've done a great job.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I don't know, working with Paul, it's very exciting what we're trying to put together here. I think it's going to be a really good product at the end, and I think everybody's going to get a lot of value. And I think the intention is really to make it rather hands-on as you said. So it's not just theory. You can go back
Yeah.
and implement.
You can go back and implement. Yeah, Charles Swihart said, my account manager and myself are registered for December. Should the leader of my tech side attend as well? What do you guys think?
Who-
Like your director of ops, like maybe from that
Probably
onboarding
service manager, I would
onboarding
guess.
standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. He's saying too late. I just registered him. Yeah. I think that, I think I would agree with that. I mean, anybody who's going to be involved. The other thing is the more people. So like if your account manager, your service manager, and you are there, the good thing is you're listening to it together and you can sit and collaborate at the breaks, at lunch, at breakfast. You can say, hey, what are we going to do when we go back? Instead of you trying to absorb 2 days of content, go back and distill it to them. Whenever I do events like this, I always bring my team, because that way we've all heard it together. We come up with a plan. We come up with ideas right there, then and there. David Stone is saying, could the deeper analysis be done after the client is onboarded and our tools are installed? This would allow us to not spend as much time during the sales process running scans and analyzing an environment. We would set this deeper dive meeting up front with the client, so they'd be, yes, David, that's exactly what we're talking about. So I know Paul that there has said that there are, and we'll talk about this at class. There's some places where doing that deeper analysis before you get into a contract, it might make more sense. If they're coming in, they need a new provider, their environment's a little bit complicated or a mess, or it's a co-managed environment. I think, Rob, with co-managed, selling that up front. But either way, you have to do it. You have to charge for it, because it is, Paul, you had said it was your typical analysis took 60 to 80 hours if you're doing it right?
Yeah, 87 hours.
Okay. And then you would charge, I think if I'm going off memory, it was $250 to $300 a user to do that project.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right. So I've heard of some people charging less. I've heard of, the lowest I heard was $80 a user. I've heard up, obviously Paul, $300 a user is the highest I've heard. But so to give you some idea of you would sell this to the client and say, look, this is going to be your technology roadmap budget. We're going to do a deep analysis, and we're going to do a plan and a budget to reduce your not eliminate, you can't say that, but to dramatically reduce your area of risk, increase stabilization, lower costs, and increase collaboration, productivity, and also get you on a roadmap. So, you don't want to just say, hey, we're going to sell you. I don't think, personally, the marketer in me doesn't like just saying, hey, we're going to call it onboarding, because that's not sexy. Or we're going to do an assessment, because it's actually more than just the assessment. It's the plan you come back with is the value. And that's going to take you some time, and you definitely want to charge for it. And we'll talk about all that in this class. All right. Okay. So Jeff just said we're currently at 103. So he said about a dozen plus spots remain. So yeah, if you guys want to come to this class, it's not very expensive. It's going to help you with this account management. And Paul, tell me that stat again. You said that the best in class MSPs, the ones that are 18-20% EBITDA, are growing 15-20% year over year. You said that they're doing this process with 90% of their customers. Is that what I heard correctly?
Yes.
And the ones who are not making money, do you have any stats?
I think less than 90.
Well, less than 90, right? Okay, but
I mean, I have all the data. I don't remember that data point. And then actually it's in that annual report slide deck that you have.
okay. All right. Well, guys, bottom line is, if you're going to run an MSP, and I think it also, Paul, like you were saying, it also kind of helps you with hiring and staffing and smoothing out your service delivery, because when you have these projects and what's coming down the road and they're planned and they're not these episodic crisis that you have to deal with, clients don't like it, but it's easier for you to smooth out that delivery and hiring process. So, all right. All right. So I see a bunch of, I hope you guys were looking at the chat, because it's very difficult, All right. Is there any questions that you guys see in that, or any things you want to comment on that were in the chat, Rob or Paul?
I think we covered a lot of it. As you know, I'm more than happy to talk to people about stuff afterwards if they have anything. There was one thing that was really interesting. Tanner Bell says, biggest hardship is the relationship between engineers and account managers. That is because you have set them up to be antagonistic to each other. And that's something that I mentioned at the very beginning. You need to have an escalation procedure that you adhere to within your organization. And the account managers are nowhere near part of that escalation process. You know, I've gone into some rather large companies with a lot of account managers, and the account managers were spending all their time handling tickets that the help desk couldn't get back to them on. That is the worst use in the world for account managers. You know, the account manager if Robin, if you come to me and say, hey, you know, I've got this problem with this ticket, the account manager says, you know, I'm glad you brought that up to me. We have this escalation process. I'm going to turn this ticket over to Rob. And if Rob doesn't get back to you within 24 hours, please let me know. But that's the best way for you to escalate these going forward.
Mm-hmm.
You got to take your account managers out of that process.
Okay.
Yeah. I also think that we saw a big transformation from that perception of like, oh, those sales guys, they just go and sell whatever they can to make a buck. Once we got aligned on this, and ops and sales were working hand in hand to go analyze what the thing is, to align them to our tech stack and all these things that are actually very ops friendly in your company. It eliminated friction on that end too, because it was like, oh, sales is actually going to, you know, the marketing is trying to find the right win-win customers. Sales is presenting the stuff that we actually want to support with the stack we want to support it with. And so ops became bigger champions of sales than ever before. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Unless they were still snickering behind our backs, probably, but not to our faces.
Well, yeah, I think in any department of a company. So like if you look at sales and marketing, if there's not an adult in the room with a plan where everybody knows, here's where we're going, here's what we're trying to accomplish, here's the rules, here's how we're, you know, there's process and procedure. If there's not an adult in the room, a leader who's saying this is how we do things, and you just start throwing bodies in there, you're going to have chaos because nobody kind of knows what the North Star is. Nobody knows what processes or procedures. And so people start just making stuff up, because if they're not given a plan, people just kind of make stuff up. And so if you're dealing with that kind of disruption in your company, I mean, look, guys, running an MSP is hard enough. Holy shit. You guys have a tough business. Don't make it harder when you don't have, you know, you got to have plans. You got to have like, here's best practices. All right. Anything else you guys want to comment on other than the wives hardly know how amazing we are technology wise, which Richard said earlier, but I don't think it's just your wives. I think there's a lot of people do not really truly understand what you guys do and the difficulty of it. I believe that more by every day. I mean, that's why I think you should charge a premium. That's why you shouldn't be working your ass off for no money. That's ridiculous. You absolutely deserve better than that. So, okay. All right. What if you're just a one-man shop? You know, I mean, here's,
Robin, I'm going to have to,
what's that?
I'm going to have to jump off pretty soon.
Yes, Paul. Let me say this and then we'll wrap up. So if you got to jump, Paul, that's fine. But let me just say this, guys, you know, if one of the things people ask me, like, if you had to do it all over again, what would you do different? And you know what I would have done different? I would have stopped thinking myself as small. I would have gone and found somebody where I am today and said, what do I got to do to get there? And I would have started doing it earlier, because there's this mindset. And I felt I did the same thing. There's a mindset that you have where you think, because I'm small, I can't do best in class account management. I can't do these things. And the reality is you're going to do it on a smaller scale, but you still got to know how to do it. You still got to know how to onboard a customer, look at an environment, put together a roadmap, put together a budget. And if you start there, that way you don't start building a mess. Like, one of the things I said at Roadshow, it's something I say often, is when you start a business as an entrepreneur, we're all very scrappy, and that's a good thing. That's a positive thing. People say, oh, you're scrappy. And that basically means you can get shit done with very few limited resources, right? But at some point, you got to stop being scrappy and start being strategic. Because if you keep being scrappy for a long time, you end up with a scrap heap of customers, a scrap heap of a process, a scrap, it's like you've got to get some professionalism in there. So to me, this is not a lot of money. We're not asking, we could have charged a shit ton more for this, what Paul's, and I said, look, we got sponsors who are going to pay for it. I want this, maybe someday in the future when, we've done 12 of these things, the price will go up. But for right now, this is fine. We're just looking to, provide this information. Rob, I know, is very interested in this because for our members, we literally designed this class because we said, hey, holy shit, there's a ton of our members who are growing and they're not doing bad, but they just don't have this piece nailed. And if they could nail this, they would be double the profits. They would be so much better. So, all right, Rob, and I know Paul had to jump off. We're over time. Any last comments, any questions we missed that I don't want to be hurtful?
No, I don't see anything that jumps out. I think to Melanie too, it's like what you were saying. Process. Everywhere you can get a process in place in your business and see you can scale. But I think that this was great. Hopefully it provided some value here.
Yeah, I see a question. It's like how to decline per device, per user. I'm not really sure what that question is. So if you want to shoot a longer explanation, we're going to have to wrap up here because, we were at a hard stop at 11:30. My hard stops are like, not, sometimes they're just like a pause. But you can email us, ask@themarketingteam.com. And put in this if you have additional questions. So Rob, I know we really focused on Paul, but shoot an email to ask@themarketingteam.com and put Rob Patterson in the subject line if you have a question. And Rob, I'm sure, would be happy to get on a call or email you back. Just, that way you guys can get your questions answered because we do have to wrap up here. But and Rob is phenomenal. Like I said, he's a $6 million year MSP. He was in service leadership. He is. Are you certified EOS? I can't remember.
Not certified. Just battle tested.
You're right. Okay, hey, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he knows how the onboarding account management process is done and done well. So anything we can do to continue to help you. Obviously, that masterclass, guys, tickets, it's going to sell out for sure. Because most people are bringing 2-3 people, so we're probably about like 5 sales away from it being full. So if you want to go, make sure you get in now. I don't know when we're going to do this again. Okay, so all right. With that said, Rob, I appreciate you. Paul already left, so I'm seeing comments here. Like I'm distracted. I just want to make sure. But if you have additional questions, guys, Stephanie's just saying awesome information. Thank you, Rob, Paul. Perfect. Ask at the marketing team and we'll work with you. Okay. And my hair looks nice. Thank you. Better than yours, Rob. Maybe,
you win for sure.
I think yours would be easier to deal with. Though.
Yeah.
This is a project every day. Okay. All right. Love y'all. Okay. See you guys. Okay. Bye.